This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Middle of the week, you know what that means. The Eagles' first injury report for NFL Week 5. It's up right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Also means a Weinberg Wednesday. Dave Weinberg joins us coming up at 6:15 to get more into the Philadelphia Eagles. Plus, I want to know if Dave Weinberg's been watching baseball. He's a baseball guy at heart. So is Dave Weinberg consuming this baseball? Or is he one of the people who said, nah, I'm out? I want to find out from Dave Weinberg for a Weinberg Wednesday coming up just about 14 minutes from now here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. Also, don't forget, coming up at the top of the hour, Yankees-Rays Game 3. I keep wanting to say Joe Girardi's the manager of the Yankees, and I don't know why. It's Aaron Boone. Either way, the manager of the Yankees, who is now Aaron Boone, that's how I'll start doing it. I mean, he just totally blew that game last night. I mean, what on earth are you thinking? Bringing in J.A. Happ in the second inning of a game. What is that garbage? It's garbage. It's the dumbest thing. So we got a lot to get to this hour. Also, NBA Finals last night. The Lakers, 3-1 lead, as expected. If you didn't think that was going to happen last night, I feel bad for you. You probably lost some money on it because you thought the Heat were going to win last night because Bam Adebayo was back in the lineup. Also, later this hour, we got to have an honest conversation about these sports TV ratings because I'm really getting tired of these fraudulent, manipulative, and headlines that are full of a bunch of hogwash and horse manure. But to start off the show, of course, I mentioned the Eagles injury report. And look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, you can go to 973ESPN.com for the full injury report. But there are two players back at practice today, as noted in the injury report, and that is Desean Jackson and Alshon Jeffery. Now, they were both limited at practice. But if you have even any chance, a smidge of a chance, any realm of opportunity to beat the Steelers on Sunday, you're going to need at least one of those guys out there. I'm not sure you need both of them, for sure, but you need at least one of them. Because the Pittsburgh Steelers can score points. They can score points quickly. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. Roethlisberger is actually one of the best fantasy quarterbacks this year in all the NFL. He's putting up crazy numbers. In fact, there were points in time where you wanted Roethlisberger over some of the bigger names if you were a fantasy football player. He's having a good year. The offensive line, they're back and cooking. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's healthy. That Claypool from Notre Dame, he's a freak. He's really good. If you have any chance of beating the Steelers, you got to score. And I've said this once. I've said this twice. I feel like I'm a broken record saying this the last couple of years. At some point, Doug Peterson needs to get his head out of the sand and get his team to score more points. Isn't the key of the game to score more than your opponent, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple strategy. It's a very simple strategy. And I think sometimes we overlook the fact that because the defense plays well, to the chagrin of some of you Jim Schwartz haters, that the defense is doing their job. But the offense isn't doing their job. And I'm concerned now from week to week, do the Eagles have enough firepower to match up with fill-in-the-blank team? It was obvious they didn't have the firepower to match up with the Rams. I don't know. Do they have the firepower to match up with the Steelers? I think they might get outclassed by the Ravens straight up. The Cowboys, we know the firepower they have with not one, not two, but three super talented wide receivers in Lamb and Gallup and Cooper. Don't forget about Zeke Elliott in the backfield. Dak can sling it. He's not afraid to throw the ball. So you look down the Eagles' schedule for the next few weeks. It's very important when you look at those games that when you look at the Eagles' offense, and if you have an Alshon Jeffery and a Desean Jackson out there, D-Jax and Jeffery on each side, that changes the dynamics of this offense incredibly. And I don't know if you have a chance to beat the Steelers or the Ravens or the Cowboys if both of those guys are not out there. You might be able to get away with if it's D-Jax out there and not Alshon, just because the speed element he brings to the field. And obviously, let's be realistic. Carson Wentz, he doesn't really want to throw the John Hightower. It is what it is, right? So when you think about this team, pay attention to the offense. Pay attention to how the injury report plays out this week. Because that injury report is going to tell you a lot about the Eagles' chances of getting something done against these top-tier teams. Half the league is scoring points. The doggone Denver Broncos with Brett Rippon, the third-string quarterback, put up 30-plus points. What is the Eagles' excuse? That's right, they don't have a good excuse. So seeing Alshon Jeffery and Desean Jackson back on the field, at practice, catching balls, working drills, it's a good sign. It gives you a little bit of hope. You want to see those pictures and those videos, you can go check it out right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Again, Dave Weinberg coming up about 7 minutes from now to talk more about the Eagles. I mentioned the baseball. Yankees, Rays coming up, top of the hour, 7 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN. And getting back to the ridiculous decision by Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager, to go J.A. Happ and try to throw a bullpen game, which really wasn't a bullpen game because you was a starter in the bullpen. So you wasted 2 starters in one night because you were trying to outsmart the Rays because they had a bunch of lefties in their lineup. I think sometimes there's a thin line between being aggressive and being ridiculous. And we see it all the time in sports, right? How many times have we seen a coach call a play in football, for example, some exotic play that goes absolutely nowhere because either the guys are not fully sure how to properly execute it or because the coach just has a bad feel for the game? How many times have you watched a baseball game and a manager leaves the pitcher in too long, and then when he brings in the next pitcher, it's so obvious he's overthinking when he brings that guy in. And then the whole game blows up. Oh, right, that's the Phillies season of 2020. We saw that 100 times this year. How many times you watched a game and you saw that one lineup in a basketball game works in a series, and the coach is like, I'm going to put that lineup back out there again, and then the other team goes on like a 12-2 run. And then the coach has to call a timeout because he realized, this craziness came back in his face. It's a thin line. It's a thin line when it comes to decision making. And I always think when I'm watching a game, whether I'm at a game or I'm watching on television, whether it's baseball or basketball or football, the first thing that comes to my mind is, why are we trying to go crazy? Listen, Philly worked for one play. It's not like Doug Peters was running a triple option offense in the Super Bowl. The 46 Bears defense worked for 1 year for the Bears. Buddy Ryan brought that defense to Philadelphia. That team never won a playoff game. Some of these things work in doses. We saw the Miami Dolphins run the Wildcat for a year, and they won the division, but it also be the year the Patriots didn't have Tom Brady. It worked for 1 year. And guess what? Didn't work much after that. Gimmick style, getting fancy. Sometimes you just got to get back to basics. Sometimes you just got to get back to fundamentals. I got to wonder sometimes, do these coaches remember what the fundamentals are anymore? Yankees, Rays, 7 o'clock tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of football, don't forget Thursday Night Football tomorrow night on 97.3 ESPN. Some guy named Tom Brady versus some guy named Nick Foles. Yeah, Bucks versus Bears tomorrow night on 97.3 ESPN. 609-403-0973 is the playsugarhouse.com text board. Joey D and Dave, I see your text. We're going to get to your text a little bit later in the show. But we got her on the break. Coming up next, Dave Weinberg. Weinberg Wednesday here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. Talk more about the Eagles, and we'll ask him about his perspective on the baseball playoffs so far. Just give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down. He's a baseball guy. I wonder what a baseball guy like Dave thinks about the baseball playoffs. Game Night on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you, visit them online at gmslaw.com. As I said, the text board is open at 609-403-0973 with the playsugarhouse.com text board. We'll get your text just a little bit later in the show. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. As promised, it's a Weinberg Wednesday. Without further ado, Dave Weinberg joins us on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles' latest injury report is out. You can go check it out right now at 97.3ESPN.com. Dave, how is Wednesday in October treating you?
Played golf today, so life's pretty good today.
So that means you got more fresh air than me today. That's a good sign.
Oh, that's good. Yep.
So
you got to
Dave,
get outside more.
yeah, exactly. So, Dave, before we get to a couple other things, I have to start with the Eagles injury report because the biggest thing that stood out to me before we get to the game on Sunday is I keep coming back to this point in my mind, and maybe I'm obsessing over it too much. Maybe I'm just beating a dead animal here. What do they call it? Beating a dead horse. That's the phrase I was going for. But I watched a third string quarterback for the Broncos and his team get over 30 points in a game on Thursday night. Doug Peterson and the Eagles have been completely unable to get anywhere close to 30 points this year. And when I saw that Alshon, Jeffery, and Desean Jackson are back on the field, I look at them as this might be the only chance this team has to be able to keep up with the majority of their schedule the rest of the year, because you have an offensive-minded coach, you have a guy who was picked second overall, but you have an offense that not just this year, but for the last couple of years has struggled to be even an average level offense in terms of scoring.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need Alshon and Desean back. You're right. I mean, it was great to see some of those other guys step up, like Travis Fulgham and guys like that. They really came through when the team really needed him at San Francisco. But you can't expect them to carry the whole team for the entire year. You got to get to the point where you have all your weapons, so to speak: Alshon, Desean, Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, to go with Zach Ertz and Miles Sanders and everybody. Then maybe you'll see an offense that's living up to its capability. Although then again, with the offensive line in flux is the way it is every week. Who knows if Carson will even have enough time to get the ball to those guys.
I just still have to wonder, even if they get both of those guys back, and let's say they're 100%, I mean, what does it really mean in the long run, Dave? Because, as I said, they won the Super Bowl that year. They had a top 5 offense, right? Since then, Doug hasn't been able, and whoever's been quarterback has not been able to muster the same type of. And I'm honestly getting tired of hearing about, oh, they haven't had a deep threat. Well, at some point you got to get creative. You got to do something a little different. You know, the old saying is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, if it's broke, you got to fix it, Dave.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, it's kind of surprising because Doug's known for his innovation, his aggressiveness, his creativity. At least he was up until this year. So yeah, it is a little bit surprising that they haven't been able to manufacture something. I don't know if that's because of the quarterback is different, or maybe it's just the offensive personnel just isn't the same. It just seemed like that 2017 team just kind of had that special chemistry, especially when Nick took over, which I know people don't like to hear that, but there was no getting around the fact that the team just kind of operated differently when he was the quarterback. And it's coming upon Carson. I mean, Carson played a pretty good game against the 49ers. I mean, he really had nowhere to go but up. But I think going forward, they're just going to have to find a way to design the offense to suit his skills a little bit, roll him out in the pocket, and a little bit more. I wouldn't have him running as much as he was the other night, but I think they need to do something to get this offense on track.
Speaking of the game on Sunday, let's touch on that now. One of the things that stood out to me in that game, aside from the Fulgham touchdown and Wentz running, these is 2 straight weeks now that Jim Schwartz has got that defensive front rolling. I mean, they had 18 quarterback hits against the Bengals. They had 15 on Sunday. And it really seems like that, maybe Brandon Graham was right. Maybe there was something that said the guys looked at what Schwartz did after the Rams game, and they really did fire them up.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, they're finally playing up to their potential. They spent all this money on their front four, gave Fletcher Cox a big contract. Now they have Malik Jackson. Go with Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, all the other guys. So it's about time, really. I mean, they got off to a slow start, but now they're playing the way they're supposed to be playing, and hopefully they can continue that going forward.
When you think about going forward, as you said then, how do they maintain that pressure? Because right now they lead the NFL in sacks. They're top 10 in the NFL in quarterback hurries. Is there a specific way they can keep this up, considering that the level of competition is going to get harder with teams like the Steelers, the Ravens, and a high-vaulted Cowboys offense?
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them. I mean, they put up some great numbers, but look at who they're playing. Like you mentioned, Washington, Cincinnati, San Francisco. I mean, the Rams, I guess, too. But it's only going to get tougher from here on out. And you're also facing quarterbacks who are both elusive, like Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, and get rid of the ball very fast, a la Drew Brees, who they also face, coming up. So I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as it's been for the first 4 games for them. But Jim Schwartz, I guess, if anybody can figure out a way to do it, I guess it's him.
Dave Weinberg joining us here for a Weinberg Wednesday here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following Dave on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Also, check out his extra point columns at 97.3 ESPN.com. Dave, you mentioned about Jim Schwartz. I always scratch my head about, there's a segment of this fan base that thinks the only good defensive coordinator who's ever lived in Philadelphia was Jim Johnson and Buddy Ryan, even though Buddy Ryan never won a playoff game in his doggone life with the Eagles, but that's neither here nor there. What is with this segment of the fan base that looks at Jim Schwartz and just hates the guy so much?
I'm not sure. You could probably throw Bud Carson in there too. He was a pretty good defensive coordinator as well. But yeah, it's
Dave, you're a historian of the game, okay? The average Eagles fan doesn't remember Bud Carson, okay? Let's be realistic.
Okay. But yeah, Jim, I don't know. He seems to kind of have that personality that grates on people. He's very sarcastic at times, quick-witted. Tell some jokes that maybe go over people's heads sometimes. But I don't really quite know what the reason is for the dislike. I mean, I think he's done a pretty decent job since he's been here. But this is an offensive-driven league now, like it or not. I mean, this is the way offenses are expected. It's designed for offenses to put up, score touchdowns and put up 30 points a game. If you can just hold a team to under 24, I think you're doing a pretty good job in today's NFL. So I'm not quite sure what the hatred is towards Jim Schwartz. I think it's kind of unfounded, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't get it either. So, Dave, let's flip it forward, looking to Sunday's game specifically versus the Steelers. The Steelers have had an extra week to prepare for the Eagles. In your mind, what is a key for the Eagles coming up against a team that, realistically, when you have that much time to prepare, it doesn't matter who you are, they're going to have at least some advantage, despite the fact that they have Ben Roethlisberger and guys like him on that team?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough challenge, I think, for the Eagles. Again, I think the same. I think it's the same challenge that they have every week, is to just get pressure on the quarterback. Ben's a big, strong, tough guy, though. I mean, it's a lot easier to. It's one thing to put pressure on him, but it's another to actually get him down on the ground or make him throw before he wants to. He's pretty good at buying extra time to find his receivers and stuff. So I think that's that's always the challenge for a defense. Offensively, you're right. I mean, just as we talked about earlier, they have to find a way to be more productive. I don't know that it's going to cut it. I mean, the way they've been playing lately, I don't know that's going to cut it against the Steelers, the Ravens, Cowboys probably. Well, they don't stop anybody. But you have some really tough challenges coming up, so it's going to be up to Doug to really get that offense on track. As soon as they can get Alshon and Desean back, and I guess Jalen too, the better off they'll be. But I'm not quite sure they're going to play this week anyway, though.
Dave, I got to ask you about baseball because there's a lot of games lately, and I want to know, how much are you watching? How much are you not watching? Are you watching certain teams? Are you watching certain leagues? Like, how are you consuming the baseball? Because I feel like for me, I'm not the baseball guy you are, so I got to caveat that. For me, I have certain teams I like watching. I like watching the A's. I like watching the Padres. I like watching certain teams. So I'm a little less inclined to consume certain games than others, personally.
I'm kind of with you there. I'm more inclined to watch some of the teams that maybe are kind of underdogs. Like you said, the Padres. I think the A's, even the Astros, as vilified and as hated as they are, they're playing pretty well. And it's going to be interesting to see, if they're able to prove to people that, that yes, they did cheat. Yes, they kind of backed their way into the championship, but they're also a pretty good team, and I think they're kind of proving that now. They really have the A's on their heels right now. I mean, I think the A's might have. I don't know if they won today or not. I'm not sure.
7-7 tie game right now in the top of the eighth.
Right. So Astros win that, they win the series. So it's going to be. But yeah, I'm with you though. I do like the A's and the Padres and the Rays. And even the Braves too. I mean, I guess I should say I watch every game, but I don't watch all the game though. I got to fight with my wife for the remote. She's more into Dancing with the Stars and that kind of stuff. So I really have to split my time.
Well, for me, the big thing is for example, I'm a huge college football guy. So like I'm the guy who watches college football from like when the Pac-12 was on. I'm watching from noon to midnight. I'm literally formulating my entire day around watching these football games. So if there's anything else going on at that time, it's it's a little hard for me to squeeze it in. So for me, if there's football on, like even Thursday football, I honestly wanted to see Brett Rippon play. I just wasn't as engaged in the baseball games that night. I still had it on watching, but I wasn't like as engaged.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, because of the way the season went for the teams. I mean, only 60 games. It was kind of no fans. It was kind of hard to really get behind them and to get interested in it. It was kind of like a stop and go kind of season. So I can understand where people probably they were so used to doing other stuff in the summer because there was no baseball that when baseball came back, they had a hard time getting back into it. I mean, I didn't, but I know that a lot of other people did.
By the way, the A's just took the lead 8-7, so there's still hope for them right now.
Cool.
You mentioned the watching habits of people. We know that television watching across the board is down 25%. And I have to wonder how much of maybe the pandemic affected people's watching habits. So maybe people are just so out of practice when it comes to consuming just things on television in general.
I think you probably saw a lot of TV watching during the pandemic when everything was locked down. Restaurants were closed, casinos were closed. But now, when summertime hit, everybody was so desperate to get outside and enjoy things that they kind of took for granted, I guess, in the past. I mean, restaurants were, booming a lot. Again, the beaches were relatively crowded. I mean, I think they were just so happy to be not unconfined for a change and get outside and enjoy life that maybe that's the reason why the TV ratings kind of dropped off a little bit during the summertime.
Speaking of getting out and about, I know there were no fans for it, but what were your thoughts on the Shoprite Lpga Classic?
Really cool, but it was weird. I went twice, and Thursday. I think it was Thursday and Sunday, and just really weird. I mean, the atmosphere just wasn't the same. No fans, nobody cheering. It's kind of cool to see a first-time winner, Mel Reed, win the tournament, and they did a good job with the fellow players and caddies and stuff, sprayed her with champagne and all that stuff. But just not having any grandstands on the 18th green. People just riveted to see those girls come down the stretch, fighting for that championship. It just wasn't. I don't know. It was kind of a little bit of a letdown, to be honest with you.
Is it maybe a little bit of a preview of also what we've seen, not just from the entire golf season, but also thinking about how, for lack of a better term, empty feeling some of the moments of the Masters are going to be next month. You usually when a guy's having a great round, you hear the roar of the crowd, and now you're not going to have a roar out there. Yeah,
that's going to be interesting. Because the Masters are, its own separate animal, if you will. It's so steeped in tradition and the excitement that usually, like you mentioned, Amen Corner, and people can hear roars when someone makes a great shot from 3 holes away, and and even people like playing that hole, they'll turn and look and kind of imagine what's happened, probably steal a glance at the leaderboard, and that's not going to be the case this year. It's going to be different. I mean, the course itself, I think, might lend itself to being a pretty enjoyable tournament. I mean, after all, it is the Masters. It's the best of the best, Augusta National. But, it's not going to be the same without the fans, because they're the ones that kind of really make it a really special event.
Yeah, and speaking of the fans, we're seeing that baseball, they're going to allow a small number of fans.
Not fans.
What's that?
I'm sorry, patrons at Augusta National, not fans.
Oh, right. Well, my bad. Listen, we got to correct ourselves, because someone's going to tweet at us or text in and correct us, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of fans, I did want to ask you about this. One more thing about the fans part, and that is we're seeing that baseball, they're going to have fans at the LCSs in the World Series and a small number of tickets they're giving out. We're seeing that these college football games, they don't have full houses, but there's a small number of fans in these buildings. Do you think we're trending in the direction of maybe getting fans, back into some, legitimate volume in 2021?
They seem to be moving in that direction. I mean, I know the state of Pennsylvania, I think, just recently gave permission to allow fans in the stadiums. Now, whether the Eagles are going to be allowed to do that or not, I don't know. But even so, they'll have 7,500 fans maybe at the link, which why would you even bother with that? But I think they should probably be taking a cautious approach to this, though. I mean, you're seeing fans just cram into stadiums, and that's just not a really good idea in some instances. Like, I think the Miami Dolphins they've gotten to go ahead to have 65,000 fans at the Hard Rock Stadium. That's not smart. I just think they should take their time with it, the way high schools, I guess, are, and set the capacity, set small limits, and allow them grow from there. But if they can do that, then I think you will see maybe a return to close to normal in 2021 anyway. I hope so.
He's Dave Weinberg. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out his extra point columns at 97.3ESPN.com. And Dave, before I let you go, I see you now got a podcast, Tequila and Touchdowns.
That's
with
correct.
Dave Weinberg. So I have a couple tequila questions for you, because I need a little clarity, because I'm not as knowledgeable about your tequila tastes here. So are you more of a clear or a brown tequila guy?
I like both. I have my certain. I'm not like a connoisseur yet. I'm trying to develop my taste for it. But I can go back and forth. I can go either way. I mean, I like Patron quite a bit, and I like the Patron Cafe, which is kind of a coffee flavored, real dark tequila. I really enjoy that, but I like the clears too. I'm kind of I don't have any prejudices when it comes to tequila.
I'm personally a silvers guy. I like the clears and the silvers if I'm going to go tequila.
Okay.
It's just
All right.
it's just
I
my
got you.
preference. Whether you mentioned Patron, Hornitos, the Jose Cuervo silvers. Those are, if I'm going to go tequila, those are usually the roads I'm rolling down. So.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, maybe you'll have to check it out then.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You got the podcast up there. I gotta listen to it. Tequila and Touchdowns with Dave Weinberg. People can check it out. I know you got the links posted up right now on your Twitter account at Dave Weinberg 19. Of course, Dave joins Game Night every week here for a Weinberg Wednesday on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, always appreciate the time and the conversation.
Well, thanks, Josh. I appreciate you having me as always.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your texts coming up next. Of course, don't forget Sports Bash Cash final word of the day coming up at 6:55. The final Sports Bash keyword of Wednesday. One more chance for you to win up to $10,000 when you put that word over at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Don't forget, coming up top of the hour, Yankees versus Rays. Action coming up here on 97.3 ESPN. As I promised, we'll get to your texts on the other side, 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Lead up to Yankees, Rays. First pitch after 7 o'clock tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks again to Dave Weinberg for joining us for a Weinberg Wednesday. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board, place your legal sports bets at PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. You're going to match your first deposit up to $250. Must be 21 in order to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 609-403-0973. Got a few texts to get to here. Start with the first guy that came in here earlier. Joey D. from Ventnor chimes in. He had a Sixers-related question. He says, I would like Doc Rivers to show Joel Embiid that winning and fun can go together. If you put in the work, most of the time, you will win most of the time. And fun ensues. If Joel loses, he doesn't have fun, and he loses interest. Can't afford that. What are your thoughts? That's Joey D. in Ventnor. Well, it gets back to the conversation that I know Mike Gill has had on the Sports Bash, and I had with Scoop B yesterday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You missed that conversation. You can go check it out on the Game Night podcast over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Doc Rivers is somebody who he has a long history, right, of knowing how to relate to different players, how to maximize who they are on the court when he's given time to work with them. Whether that, player is, Tracy McGrady really became a breakout star when he got to Orlando. He made Darrell Armstrong a legitimate NBA point guard, a guy who was really overlooked as a nobody, basically, before Doc got a hold of him. You look at what he did in Boston. He elevated Paul Pierce. He brought Garnett, Pierce, and Ray Allen together to win a championship. He took a point guard in Rajon Rondo that was not a shooter at all and turned him into a high-caliber point guard. Playoff Rondo was born in Boston under Doc Rivers' tutelage. You look at what he did with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and J.J. Redick and all those guys over there with the Lob City, and then later when he had Tobias Harris. He finds ways to bring out more out of players than was previously there. And I have to think that he can do the same thing with Joel. And I think that Doc, being a former player, will know how to talk to Embiid in a way that will get him to listen. I'm reading the book Three Ring Circus by Jeff Pearlman. He was on the show a couple weeks ago. And it talks about how Phil Jackson, he had to sit Kobe and Shaq down and say, listen, guys, this is what it is. And if you don't like it, let me know now, and I'll trade one of you. And both of them were like, all right, we're buying in. But Phil could do that because, one, Phil had rings on his hands, and number two, Phil was a former player. So Phil played with and coached Hall of Famers before he ever got a hold of Shaq and Kobe. Well, Rivers is in a similar boat. not the same number of pedigree with championships, but he has played with and coached superstars. Remember, he played with Dominique Wilkins. He's coached everybody from Tracy McGrady to Paul Pierce to Kevin Garnett. He's coached Ray Allen. He's coached Chris Paul. He's coached Blake Griffin. He's coached so many different guys. So I have to believe he can find a way to get through to Joel. And whether it's specifically fun or not fun, it's up in the air. I think that a lot of times when Joel says stuff like that, I don't even know if he really means it. No offense to Joel. I think it's just the best way he can describe it. Like it's the best way he can find to verbalize it that makes sense to everybody. But you're right. Winning is fun. And I think that Joel will have more fun when the team is winning. And as a general principle, you are right about that. And I think Doc Rivers is going to be the guy that, if anybody has a chance to do it, it's him. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Couple more texts to get you here. We'll get back to the NBA in just a moment. No text came in about that, but I want to get to Dan from EHT chimes in. He says, what type of record would the Eagles have if they had a completely healthy starting lineup? And also, who, in your opinion, will win the NFC East? All right, so what I know now about the Eagles, if they were completely healthy and everybody was on the field and everybody was able to play at a level of health that's not in question, this is an 11-5 roster. Now, I didn't expect them to be healthy, so I had them going 10-6 before the year began. I don't think this is anything more than a 10 or 11 win team because, and I know part of this is hindsight, being 2020, and now we know more about the team. We can say this. I think it's becoming very, very, very obvious that, number one, the issues at linebacker are way worse than anybody wanted to admit previously. The way the Eagles are being completely just manipulated and whipped around and just wrecked by running backs and tight ends in just a few games this year it's just blatantly obvious. The linebacker situation is way worse than I think we even realize. And I think some people even want to admit, like Jim Schwartz. I don't think he wants to fully admit how bad the situation is. At least to the media, he won't admit it. I think the problems with the linebackers combined with the fact that you just don't have any depth after your top receivers. Listen, Travis Fulgham was a nice story, but he's not the next Victor Cruz, okay? He's not the next anything. We don't know what he is yet. I think that the obvious issues of depth after their top two skill players at different positions, whether it's tight end or it's wide receiver, and the issues with linebacker, I think it's blatantly obvious that the Philadelphia Eagles have problems in those positions. I think if they were completely healthy, the secondary would be much more cohesive and more balanced. I think that if they were completely healthy, you would see the defensive line be more consistent week to week instead of basically not seeing anything from them for the first 2 weeks and then them just going off the last 2 weeks. I think that if they were completely healthy, the offensive line would do a better job at opening holes for the running backs and, allowing Wentz to, not have to worry about pressure coming at him, even though at times he looks better on the run than he does in the pocket. I think if they were completely healthy, I think that Alshon and Desean would be out there making plays, getting first downs, being guys that Wentz can depend on. Because let's be realistic, I don't think he trusts John Hightower at all. I think the only receivers he trusted the other day versus the 49ers was Greg Ward, Travis Fulgham, Zach Ertz, and he trusted Miles Sanders, and that was it. It seemed like if anybody else was open, he didn't trust them. Even Richard Rodgers, he seemed tentative to even throw him the ball. He had no interest in throwing the other guys the ball. He has a handful of guys he trusts, and that's it. I think that's a problem. And maybe part of that is because there was no offseason and training camps and OTAs and mini camps before they arrived in August. But I think that a quarterback wide receiver issue of trust is important. And remember, you're without your first round wide receiver, Jalen Reagor. And if you don't have Jalen Reagor out there either, I think that hurts as well. I think he was supposed to have a major impact on the dynamic of this team. And Maybe if Dallas Goedert is still hurt and it's D. Jackson, Rager, and Alshon out there with Ertz, I think the offense would look a lot different. Now, who, is my opinion, will win the NFC East? I think as of right now, at this very second, I think the Cowboys have the better offense. The Eagles have a better defense. So to me, it comes down to coaching. And I tend to trust Doug a little more than I trust Mike McCarthy and Mike Nolan. I trust Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz more. So I would lean toward the Eagles. But I'm also leaning toward the Eagles because I have an expectation, whether this is founded in, reasonable speculation or not, it's up to opinion. But I think that when Jeffery and Jackson are on the field, and when I think you bring back Dallas Goedert, and when you get some of these guys back on the field healthier than they are now, I think it's going to have a major impact. And I think that the Eagles, I think they're guaranteed to lose another 5 games this year. I think you can go through their schedule and book it right now that they're going to lose 5 more games this year at minimum, because I personally don't see a way they can keep up with the Steelers' offense. I don't think they're going to be able to beat the Ravens. I don't know if they're going to be healthy enough to take on the Cowboys on November 1st. I just don't think they're going to be healthy enough. I don't know how they're going to beat Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. So right there, I'm looking at those games, and I see, if you're asking me to be honest with you, I don't know how the Eagles offense is going to do versus the Steelers, the Ravens, or the Seahawks, the Packers. I think the Saints are a coin flip. I think the Cardinals are a coin flip. And the Cowboys are a coin flip, depending on, because remember, the Cowboys have their own issues with health on the offensive line right now. So, maybe that's a neutralizer for the Eagles with their defensive line. But I think the Eagles are guaranteed to lose 5 more games this year. So I think your record could be 8-7-1, and you could win the division. It's kind of depressing, but listen, if you make the playoffs, anything can happen, right? I mean, we've seen teams from that wild card position, from that lower seed, make postseason runs before. And I don't know if I have a ton of confidence in the Eagles make a run, but I think they can at least win a game, depending on who the team is. I think there are certain teams in the NFC that they don't have any shot of keeping up with. And one of those teams, I think, is the Packers. Another team is the Seahawks offensively. I haven't seen anything from this offense in the last 3 years that makes me believe that the Eagles can win a shootout with anybody right now. Whether that changes between October 7th, which is today, and the end of the year, we have to wait and see. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Game night on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Dave, I did promise I'd get to your text because you heard me say what I said earlier in the show. He said, hey, Josh, how about those NBA ratings? That's from Dave on the text board. Well, Dave, I appreciate you, bringing it back up. I mentioned this before I came on. I wanted to touch on this. I'm really getting sick and tired of having these conversations about the ratings. Not because I'm ignoring them. Because I'm watching them. I'm studying them. I'm curious. I'm interested. But there's these numbers that keep being manipulated to all of you out there, telling you that, the NBA finals are down 55%, and the Stanley Cup finals are down 65%, and the U.S. Open is down 49% compared to last year, right? And the numbers are completely fraudulent, and here's why. Comparing last year to this year, or 5 years ago to this year, is honestly a complete lie and is an insult to all of your intelligence out there. Television viewing across the board is down 25%. For those of you who've been following me long enough, whether on Twitter at Josh Hennig or listening to me here on 97.3 ESPN.com, I have another podcast called the Mutant Blitz Podcast, where I talk about television shows and movies when it comes to comic books. It's one of my passions. I have, one of my interests in life outside of sports is comic book movies and television shows. And there's a universal issue when it comes to television watching for a lot of networks, where they're having to make difficult decisions about what shows to keep on their networks or not based on viewership that is shifting from linear television to digital. Viewership habits across the board have dropped. The reality is that the NBA Finals have been the most watched thing on television every night they've been on, except when there's football. When they go against Sunday Night Football, they get crushed. And the only other thing people are watching on television that's not the NBA is the news. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, 60 Minutes on CBS had monster numbers the last 2 weeks. Nobody talks about how people are watching the rest of television. They only talk about how they're watching the NBA or the NFL. This year, the NBA has accounted for 7 of the top 20 non-NFL sports audiences this year. The NBA. People are watching more NBA than are watching almost anything else that's not football. They're watching it more than baseball. It is what it is. It's a fact of life. Josh Hennig, Game Night, 97.3 ESPN.